progress and trajectory has converged on waypoint 1.
Copy.
We are less than an hour from the arrival of Crew 12 to the International Space Station today, a mission that began yesterday morning at 5:15 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:15 a.m. Central. And it looks like we are coming into almost an orbital daytime for the International Space Station. As Jesse mentioned earlier, the space station is traveling at approximately 17,500 miles per hour around the Earth and sees 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. So what's happening now is they are crossing the terminator line over the North Pacific Ocean, and that terminator line is what differentiates between day and night when you are in space. Dragon is traveling equally as fast as the International Space Station, but also performing maneuvers very closely timed around the orbiting laboratory to keep its approach methodical, to keep it safe. We say slow and steady wins the race sometimes when it comes to two vehicles docking. Sandra also previously touched on this being the 25th year, which started last November, of human presence aboard the International Space Station. So just some fun facts about that time aboard. During that time, the International Space Station has traveled 4,361,970,010 miles around the Earth, and has had 1.5 million pounds of cargo delivered. That's, again, what keeps the space station going, with all of the consumables needed for the crew, as well as experiments that they've conducted aboard the space station. And of those experiments, we've seen over 4,000 research investigations conducted above the orbiting laboratory, making life better, not just in space and preparing us for future deep space missions to the moon and Mars, but also improving life for us here on Earth. Those 4,000 research investigations have been conducted by over 5,000 researchers from over 110 countries. And in that time, we've seen over 270 spacewalks with over 1,700 hours logged outside the orbiting laboratory. Now, this view coming to you from inside the Dragon capsule itself, you're looking over the shoulders of Commander Jessica Meir and pilot Jack Hathaway. This is Meir's second flight to the space station, which looks big and beautiful in your screen right now, that view coming from Dragon itself. And this is Jack Hathaway's first flight to the orbiting lab. And if you look at the very top of the space station, top as in up toward the top of your screen, you'll see that other Dragon that's currently docked. Again, that's the Commercial Resupply 33 mission, SpaceX's 33rd commercial resupply mission to the space station. What you see in front of the crew are their crew displays. They're able to monitor the entire flight to the space station, and again, once they begin their journey home, not for several months from now, but they are suited and seated. We consider these dynamic operations. We also consider these integrated operations. So that big loop is established, allowing all of the parties at play here to communicate with each other. That includes the Capcom here in Mission Control Houston, the core at SpaceX, and both the crews aboard the International Space Station and aboard Dragon itself. Integrated operations also begin when we enter the approach ellipsoid, which we already discussed happened really close to the top of this broadcast, and we will remain in these integrated operations until the crew begins their departure from the space station, again, not for several months from now. During that time, they're going to stay busy working with the research aboard the space station, living and working aboard our orbiting laboratory. Back to these crew displays, of course, we mentioned that the crew has the option to monitor the spacecraft as they fly to their intended destination. They also have the capability to take over command if they needed to of Dragon, but the entirety of the flight is intended to be autonomous, and the crew steps back and monitors. This is a great view of the space station, and if you look closely on those solar arrays, those 8 large solar arrays, you'll see on top of some of them we have a smaller, what looks like second array, and that's what it is. It's the International Space Station Rollout Solar Array, also known as IROSA, helping to provide additional power to the International Space Station. Again, this view coming from Dragon to the space station. Of course, both spacecraft can see each other now. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be monitoring Dragon's approach to the station from the cupola. As Sandra put it, the window to the world. We have 3 crew members living and working aboard the space station right now that arrived on the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft. That includes Sergei Mikhaev, Sergei Kutsverchkov, both of Roscosmos, and as aforementioned, NASA astronaut Chris Williams. All 3 of those crew members are awake right now. This is an orbital, this is their wake time. The International Space Station uses GMT as their time zone. It's sort of a branch between Houston and Russia where we monitor the Russian segment. This view of Dragon from the space station, if you look to the right side of your screen, looking pretty small there, but they'll continue to get closer, flying over the North Pacific Ocean about 260 statute miles above Earth. And of course, as we have discussed, Dragon will be docking to the zenith or space-facing port on the Harmony module, so we will start to lose the views of Earth behind Dragon, and instead Dragon will be seeing Earth behind the space station. And if you've ever been interested, you can indeed see the space station with your own eye. We have a tool that helps you do that as well. It's called Spot the Station. If you just go online to nasa.gov, check out Spot the Station. You can input your location and you'll receive a list of upcoming visibilities at dusk and dawn when the International Space Station is flying over your area. It's a pretty incredible thing to see, knowing that we will soon have 7 people living and working on it. Coming up on just 400 meters away from the International Space Station, again, the next milestone for Dragon will be to reach waypoint 1. Waypoint 1 is sometimes a pause location. However, we are expected to continue straight through to waypoint 2. That can be that is about 20 meters away from the space station. That's the final hold point before the crew gets the go to move in toward the docking hatch. Now, if you are paying attention to the bottom left side of your screen, you can see where the thrusters on Dragon are firing to keep it in its proper location as we continue the slow and steady approach to the International Space Station. You can also see a little map of Earth. As I just mentioned, we're flying over the North Pacific Ocean, both the International Space Station and Dragon, and they are just about to cross south of Portland, Oregon, and down through the southwest of the United States into the Gulf. Teams here at Mission Control Houston are conducting their go, no-go poll to approach waypoint 1. These polls happen at all times of a major dynamic moment during the flight. Again, Flight Director Brandon Lloyd leading the teams here today. This is the Orbit 2 team on console. The International Space Station is staffed 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, as we have crew living on board the space station at all times. This beautiful view coming from the space station of Dragon as they both prepare to cross over the northwest of the United States of America. As you can see, the Dragon capsule has already changed its positioning with the International Space Station. You previously could see the outline of that commercial resupply Dragon docked to the space station, but now we can't. We have moved up, and we will continue to move up toward that zenith or space-facing port on the Harmony module of the International Space Station. And as we mentioned, we do have 3 people living and working aboard the space station. So far today, they have completed their exercise. All crew members are required to exercise approximately 2 hours a day, every day while in space. Obviously, you're not using your bones or muscles as strongly as you would on the Earth during that time. And so these extended periods of exercise allow us to help keep the astronauts' bones strong while they are in a microgravity environment. Aside from their exercise, they've also enjoyed their midday meals. Chris Williams having just wrapped that up about 30 minutes ago, and the Roscosmos cosmonauts conducting some photo and video work inside the International Space Station. Chris Williams, NASA astronaut, will be primed to monitor Dragon's approach and then assist with the hatch opening operations. That includes pressurizing the vestibule, which is that small area between both the International Space Station and the Dragon hatch. Now, once the crew has docked today, we will, and once those hatches are open, we'll have a PAO event. That'll be their welcome ceremony. They'll get to discuss how it feels to be on the International Space Station, so we hope you'll stay tuned for that. After that welcome ceremony, we'll move into the International Space Station safety briefing. That's requiring participation from all crew members. That is the very first thing they do while on the space station. And then our new crew members will also get into some of the brief handover that'll take place tonight with the crew on the space station already. So again, we don't have any crew members coming home in the near future, but these handover types are to help the new crew get up to speed on what's been happening aboard the space station.
Dragon on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX ready on Dragon to ground.
Yeah, we during the PMC we had a little bit ago, we made a tentative plan to do another PMC as soon as possible after the docking, and we're going to go forward with that plan. So if you just have the surgeon ready for us after we get all docked, we would appreciate that.
SpaceX copies, and yes, we are tracking that and we'll be ready to support.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
And as you heard, the crew called down to the International Space Station Flight Control Room here in Houston, Texas. They have requested another PMC. That's a private medical conference. We keep our flight doctors on standby for these during a mission. Of course, this is something that happens frequently aboard the International Space Station and aboard our spacecraft. Is we prepare for private medical conferences. We have those standard, and so the crew is able to request one at any time. We're continuing to monitor Dragon's approach to the International Space Station. Again, expecting that docking in approximately 33 minutes. That would be at about 12:11 p.m. Pacific time, which is where I'm going to toss it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California, and my colleagues Jesse and Sandra. How is it going over there?
Thanks so much, Leah. It is going well here in Hawthorne. As you can see on the left of your screen there, that is the mission control team here in Hawthorne. And then thank you for giving us all the updates from there in the room on your right. That is Mission Control Houston. We're continuing to monitor approach. As you mentioned, we are targeting an approximate docking at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today for Dragon Freedom to the zenith port of the International Space Station. At this point, they are continuing to close in on that docking point. They're now 449 meters away. And once they do dock to the International Space Station, they will join a variety of other spacecraft currently docked. In fact, there are 6 other spacecraft currently docked to the International Space Station. That includes NASA's SpaceX Cargo Resupply Mission 33, the 33rd Cargo Resupply Mission, as well as JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Agency astronauts HTV-X1, Northrop Grumman Cygnus NG-23, Soyuz MS-28, which brought up NASA astronaut Chris Williams in November, who we have been mentioning multiple times is going to be prime for monitoring approach and docking today, as well as 2 Progress cargo spacecraft from Roscosmos, Progress 93 and Progress 92, 92 rather. And once we do regain views of the International Space Station, you'll see those various cargo spacecraft on your screen as they occupy the space station's docking ports. And we have been talking quite a bit about milestones that have been achieved over the past few years and months. It seems like we're hitting a lot of firsts in spaceflight, which is great. One of which that I did want to mention is that back in December, for the very first time ever, all 8 of space station's docking ports were fully occupied. So for the first time ever, we did have 8 spacecraft on orbit.
And although we're not getting any live views, you can still follow along with Dragon. In your bottom left-hand corner, you can see that some of those thrusters are firing. Again, the Dragon spacecraft is autonomous and is using those thrusters to ensure that Dragon is maneuvering slowly and steadily, as Leah mentioned earlier, to the space station. Each one of those little bursts help control the vehicle, orient it in the correct orientation as it's moving towards the locations that it needs to align with the International Space Station's docking adapter. And a view from inside of the Dragon cabin. On your left-hand screen is Commander Jessica Meir, and on your right is pilot Jack Hathaway. And as they're monitoring the autonomous vehicle on their display screens, and another view from the Dragon spacecraft looking at the International Space Station. It looks bright here and maybe looks small from this view, but it's actually about the size of a football field, which is pretty large. They've got a lot of space out there in space.
That's right, and the International Space Station and Dragon are actually flying over the continental United States as we speak. They're right overhead of Laredo, Texas, so if you're outside in Laredo and you're watching this, step outside and wave up to our crew, Dragon Freedom crew members, as they approach their new home for a long-duration science and research mission aboard the International Space Station. As part of some of the science that the crew will be working on during their expedition, they will be working on an IV fluid bag experiment, seeing if they can take IV fluid from the water processing system on board the International Space Station. And this is really critical as we venture out further into the solar system, because as you can imagine, water is quite heavy to launch, and you'll need IV bags for a variety of medical reasons on long-duration space flights. So if we're able to create these IV bags in the microgravity of space using recycled water, that's one less thing that we have to bring, and it creates the availability of crew members to utilize those if needed. So I'm excited to see how that science experiment goes, and you can follow along with all the science and research being done on board the International Space Station with our Space Station blog. We put out updates daily on what the crew is up to, the science and research investigations, as well as launch updates and everything to deal with the International Space Station. So check it out if you haven't already. It's a great resource.
Yeah, it's a great reminder that the International Space Station is a laboratory, and this is where they perform all these different science experiments, and again, for many different reasons, but ultimately to make life better out in space, but also here on Earth.
So continuing to get an even more clear view of the International Space Station there, you can see the solar arrays as well as the augmented solar arrays, the IROSAs, or the ISS rollout solar arrays. They're the smaller arrays stacked on some of the arrays you see there. And while they're smaller, they actually generate more power than the large arrays due to enhanced technology that has been developed since the time that those initial solar arrays launched.
And again, in your bottom right-hand screen, you have the graphic for the range. Dragon is currently about 413 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, we do have some great views switching between seeing the vantage point of Dragon looking at the International Space Station, as well as views from inside of the cabin as the crew is patiently awaiting their approach to the International Space Station.
And back inside of Dragon Freedom on your left, that is the commander, Jessica Meir. This is her second space flight, and to her right is NASA astronaut Jack Hathaway. This is his first flight to the International Space Station, and he's serving as the pilot today. And then you can't quite see them, but there are two other members on board Dragon. To the left, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno, her very first space flight. And to their right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. This is his second space flight.
And as you saw, the crew is still suited up in their spacesuits, harnessed into their customized seats for each of the astronauts. And they'll remain in their spacesuits. When we do get closer to the International Space Station, they will close their visors in preparation for docking. And that's just in case of any depressurization during that process. It's just a safety precaution. But if everything goes well, they will dock to the International Space Station, get out of those seats, and get out of their suits and get comfortable before they're able to float their way onto the International Space Station.
And so we did reach waypoint 0, which means that Dragon is 400 meters directly below station. And we are continuing to see views of it now coming from Dragon of the International Space Station, as well as there's a view of Dragon from the International Space Station as it continues its approach, now less than 400 meters away. So the next month,
It's SpaceX Dragon. We just want to confirm we expect, and when do we think we're going to get to go for suit docking?
A firm docking at about 2011. Go for suit docking will be immediately following hard capture complete, approximately 10 minutes later.
Okay, that's what we're tracking to. Appreciate it.
All right, copy.
And I think that's all of our questions.
Copy. We are back on Dragon to ground.
And just some comms there, the crew asking when they'll be able to doff or get out of their spacesuits. Sounds like it'll be about 10 minutes after hard capture, which is when the 12 hooks that connect with the International Space Station fully engage and create a hard capture between Dragon and the International Space Station.
And so on those tablets that you do see on your screen there, the crew is looking at procedures ahead of the upcoming docking targeted for an approximate time of 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today. And so they're reviewing those procedures as they near that, making sure that everything is fresh in their mind. And in addition to tablets, the crew actually had the opportunity to bring iPhones with them on board the flight for the very first time. So they'll be able to capture some imagery of the Earth, of themselves, of what they're doing as they are living and working aboard the International Space Station. And I'm looking forward to seeing all that they'll be able to capture with a camera in their pocket, just like all of us here on Earth. There are high-definition cameras on board the International Space Station as well that the crew receives training on as part of their training ahead of their launch, but I think it will be nice to see the imagery that is maybe a little bit quicker just to grab and point and click.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting that they'll be able to almost act like us here on Earth with their personal cameras with them, personal phone, and be able to, capture life on the International Space Station from each of their perspectives. I think that's going to be really awesome to see.
Yes, absolutely. And we did mention the Space Station blog a little bit earlier. We share photos that the crew captures on orbit there, as well as we have a variety of Flickr accounts where you can check out that, as well as social media. So I do encourage you to follow along. Some of my favorites are to see the aurora of the Earth as the crew is able to capture that, as well as imagery of the moon that they can capture from the unique vantage point of the International Space Station. Particularly exciting for us at NASA as we are targeting the Artemis 2 flight, a 10-day test flight around the moon to test out the Orion spacecraft and its systems ahead of a future lunar landing mission. So it'll be very cool to see that. And then also another exciting data point for this particular flight is we are planning to have a ship-to-ship call between the Orion spacecraft and the International Space Station. So Crew 12 will be able to participate in that ship-to-ship call during their mission.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome for the astronauts to be able to talk to each other at different places while they're in space.
So Dragon is that small white dot that you see on your screen there. And you can also see a little bit of the Canadarm too. That is a robotic arm that can be maneuvered from the ground and can be utilized it's used during spacewalks as well as during cargo spacecraft operations.
And the Dragon spacecraft is just about 313 meters away, making its way to waypoint 2, which should be about 220 meters away from the space station.
And Dragon and Space Station are passing over northwest South America near Ecuador. Just a few minutes ago, we mentioned that it was passing over Texas, so that really just goes to show how quickly Dragon and the International Space Station are flying at 17,500 miles per hour. Doesn't look like they're flying that fast, but they are. The International Space Station orbits the Earth 16 times a day.
And again, it doesn't look like it's doing much from this view, but you can follow the Dragon thrusters in your bottom left-hand corner with that graphic. You can see that the thrusters are firing as needed to maintain the trajectory that it needs to approach the International Space Station. And again, it's getting out of view as Dragon gets closer and closer to the International Space Station, but the top left-hand corner, and there it goes. That was Earth.
SpaceX Dragon, what a question.
SpaceX is here on Dragon to ground.
We have one more 30-second question for the doc. If there's time now, we can wait a few minutes.
A firm, standby 1.
And as we continue to look ahead towards docking at approximately 12:11 p.m. Pacific time today, we are going to talk a little bit about the mission patch for Crew 12. Most people are familiar with the idea of a mission patch, but you might not know how they come to exist. For decades, crew members have worked together to develop the patch for their mission, determining which aspects of the mission they want to highlight. So again, you do see Crew 12's mission patch on your screen. For decades, crew members are able to work together to develop the patch for their mission, determining which aspects of the mission they want to highlight and any special details they'd like to include. The crew themselves can design their patch, or they can share their design ideas with an artist who makes it come to life.
Crew 12's patch sets the scene of the crew's odyssey through an enchanted forest where adventure awaits around every corner. The trees with fresh buds emerging manifest both the crew's love and respect for nature and their hope and optimism for the future. Bright stars shine in the sky, lighting a path for each crew member, surrounded by smaller stars embodying their offspring. A mythical dragon breathes fire to fuel the trajectory of Dragon and set this crew on their mission to the International Space Station, invoking the delicate balance and connections between living things and the technology that supports them, and the spirit of partnership between NASA and SpaceX. The flags of the crew members' home nations stand along the curvature of their one home planet, demonstrating the solid foundation and relationships that have supported them throughout their individual and collective journeys. And a great live view from the International Space Station. As you can see, Dragon is much closer, and you can actually see a very, very clear view of that forward bulkhead with the nose cone open, exposing the GNC. That is what is helped guiding Dragon as it approaches the International Space Station.
And there are 3 configurations that Dragon can have. Today's configuration is, of course, to dock to the International Space Station, but there's also a configuration where that forward bulkhead is a window, as well as the availability for that to be opened up as part of spacewalks that can occur.
Yeah, it can have the Skywalker setup, which is basically aids, mobility aids, during a spacewalk on Dragon. And the cupola, the window, as Sandra mentioned, as Skywalker, are both used for free flyer missions. But since this mission is to the International Space Station, we do need that docking adapter. That's actually where
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop, approach 1 and soft capturing extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue approach to waypoint 2.
Copies.
Great news. Just some comms from the core letting the crew know that they will be able to continue to approach to waypoint 2. And as I was mentioning, with the international docking adapter configuration for Dragon, that's actually where the crew will pass through and enter to the International Space Station. Will be through this forward hatch that we're looking at right now.
That's right, and you did hear some communications there from the ground about the soft capture ring and stepping through procedures ahead of opening up that hatch following docking. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be primed for those hatch opening operations today. We are less than 10 meters away from waypoint 1 today. We did get the go that the team is comfortable approaching waypoint 2.
Currently, Dragon Freedom and the Crew 12 crew are about 221 meters away from the International Space Station. Waypoint 2, just to give some perspective, is just about 20 meters away from the station. And once we get to waypoint 2, the vehicle, the Dragon spacecraft, will align itself with the docking adapter in preparation for that final approach for docking. Again, expected at 12:11 p.m. Pacific time, just about 12 minutes away.
Station Houston on the Big Loop. Please monitor approach per step 3 of 1.102, Dragon approach and retreat monitoring. Chris, let us know when your review is complete and when you are ready for docking.
Station copies all, picking up step 3, 1.102.
You got it, good read.
And we are through waypoint 1. Before reaching waypoint 1 mission.
Station review is complete. Ready for docking.
Houston copies. You are ready for docking.
And again, some good communications. Everything looking good for docking, targeted here at approximately 12:11 p.m. Pacific. And
Station Houston on the Big Loop. At waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking, then automatically resume approach.
Station copies all.
At this point, we have passed through waypoint 0 as well as waypoint 1. Initial contact between Dragon and the International Space Station is expected at about 12:11 p.m. Pacific time or 3:11 p.m. Eastern. And before reaching waypoint 1, mission operators conducted a go-no-go poll to allow Dragon to begin its approach to waypoint 2, which is located inside the keep-out sphere about 20 meters away from the space station.
as mentioned previously, all visiting vehicles take this phased approach to station, stopping at predetermined gates for teams to run quick checks on vehicle performance before approaching station. When it comes to bringing two spacecraft together, slow and steady really does win the race, as docking operations require a great deal of precision to make sure we're keeping the spacecraft and the crew safe.
At the 20-meter distance from station's docking adapter, Dragon's approach will slow, and it will begin to align itself with the adapter to come in for the final approach.
Dragon will first make initial soft contact with the adapter's soft capture ring, which will then retract to bring Dragon in for the hard capture sequence. As a further precaution, Dragon's soft capture system includes a set of rotary spring dampeners to lessen the force of the contact between the spacecraft and the station. So with that, let's check in with Leah Cheshire in Houston for an update on Space Station. Leah?
Thanks, Sandra. Right now, the crew aboard station is preparing for the upcoming docking of Dragon. Again, we're expecting that just a little over 10 minutes from now. So everything is continuing to look good here on the space station side. Flight Director Brandon Lloyd just polled the rest of the room to make sure that we are all go, and Mission Control Houston is. NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be in the station's cupola using special software to track Dragon's approach and make sure it stays in its expected zones. He'll also be primed for the hatch opening procedure operations once Dragon is docked. So during these operations, he'll start by opening the large hatch on the node 2 Zenith, that's the space-facing port, and give them access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will pressurize the vestibule, and that's the small space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. Of course, this was previously, or currently still, exposed to vacuum prior to docking, so the crew will need to fill that with air and make sure its pressure is almost equal with the atmospheric pressure on Dragon and the space station. Chris Williams will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the station's vestibule. Now, flight controllers here in Houston will monitor and verify the pressure readings to make sure everything is leak-free before we get ready to open up those hatches. And this is, again, another slow and steady process, so it can take a couple of hours to complete. We are tracking docking coming up at 2:11 p.m. Central, 12:11 p.m. Pacific. It's followed by hatch opening about 4 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Pacific. So we're going to round that all out with that welcome ceremony I discussed earlier as Crew 12 officially joins the Expedition 74 crew currently aboard the International Space Station. Again, everything is go from here in Mission Control Houston, so sending it back over to Hawthorne for docking.
Dragon SpaceX.
SpaceX Dragon on the big loop, please go. SpaceX Dragon on the big loop, please go. Visors down.
All right, SpaceX copies, visors down, and I can confirm soft capture ring extension complete. We are not planning to hold at waypoint 2. We'll go through approach 2 prep.
I'm copies, no hold on approach 2.
Just another indication that we are getting closer and closer to docking. We did hear that call out that they can put their visors down. This fully seals their suits in preparation for the official docking to the International Space Station. Now we are at 110 meters away from the International Space Station, and waypoint 2 is up next, and that will put Dragon only 20 meters away from the space station. From here, the spacecraft will focus on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. We did copy that the visors are down, looking for confirmation that crew are ready and go for approach 2.
Crew is ready for approach 2.
And with that, we did get confirmation from NASA astronaut and the commander of Dragon Freedom that the crew's visors are down on their spacesuits and that they are go for docking now less than 100 meters away from the International Space Station. Approximate docking time today that we are tracking is 12:11 p.m. Pacific, so just minutes away from now.
They are approaching waypoint 2 now. It should only take a few minutes, 2 or 3 more minutes. You can follow along with the distance. Was moving pretty slow, but now you can see the range there in your bottom right-hand corner, almost at 80 meters away from the International Space Station.
And just prior to docking, you will hear a call out for CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point. That occurs.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for approach 2, and we'll be enabling approach 2 shortly.
Copy, so.
Again, that call out that you'll hear about 30 seconds before docking, called CHOP, is for the crew hands-off point. So any directions that would need to, any actions rather that would need to be taken would happen manually by the spacecraft autonomously versus manually by the crew. Dragon now closing in on 60 meters away from the International Space Station.
As it gets closer, we get a clearer and clearer view of the Dragon spacecraft. And you can still see some of those thrusters are firing with the graphic in your bottom left-hand screen.
And in addition to the nose cone being open, we can see a portion of Dragon's trunk there, and that black portion on the upper left of your screen there is actually the solar arrays on Dragon.
Yeah, we actually use that during flight to help power the vehicle. Once it's on station, though, we'll connect some umbilicals, and we will utilize the power from the space station for Dragon during its stay.
So the next milestone that we are looking ahead towards today is the arrival at waypoint 2, which is when Dragon Freedom is 20 meters away from the International Space Station. As you can see on your screen there, we're now 41 meters away.
Just a couple minutes away from docking. We call docking when the Dragon spacecraft first makes contact with the International Space Station, again expected for 12:11 p.m. Pacific time. And now you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that is the docking adapter. So you can follow along when we make that soft capture with the hooks in the soft capture, as well as hard capture with there's 12 hooks that will connect with the International Space Station to lock it in. The range is now on your left bottom corner. We are just at waypoint 2, just about 20 meters away from the International Space Station. You can see all those thrusters firing on the Dragon spacecraft to maintain alignment with the docking adapter just right before we approach. They are doing a very short pause here at waypoint 2, holding until the Dragon spacecraft automatically begins the approach for docking.
And you can start to see Dragon be eclipsed by a bit of a shadow here. That is because we are actually passing over the terminator line. And that is when the distinction between night and day occurs as the International Space Station orbits the Earth.
All players, this is Houston on the Big Loop. Dragon is on final approach and is a go for docking. Please monitor per steps 5 and 6 in 1.102, Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Station copies, monitoring step 5 and 6.
Great news. Great news. We did get that confirmation that we are go for docking.
And that go coming from the Capcom, or going up to the crew rather, that is Capcom Jacob Lesarge. That was up to NASA astronaut Chris Williams, who is in the cupola as we speak, monitoring approach and docking, now nearing in on 16 meters away from the International Space Station. About 30 seconds prior to docking, we might hear the call out, or we will hear the call out for CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point. At this point, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon. And the crew on board the space station can also send a retreat command to Dragon if needed. Dragon now 14 meters away from the International Space Station, closing in.
Again, what you can expect after Dragon makes contact with the International Space Station is that 12 hooks will be deployed, 6 at a time. Once those have hard captured, we will attach umbilicals to provide power between Dragon and power and connections between Dragon and the International Space Station.
Meters.
Copy, 10.
Just hearing some call-outs between the crew and the Corps of the distance between Dragon and the International Space Station, just under 10 meters.
Closing in on 8 meters. We'll stand by for the call out of CHOP. That's that crew hands off period. Freedom is approaching 5 meters away from the International Space Station.
Copy, 5.
You can now clearly see on your screen the docking adapter on Dragon as it's approaching the International Space Station. A great view from the International Space Station. You can see the short distance between Dragon, just 3 meters away.
Meters.
Copy, 2.
Continuing to close in.
1 meter.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon contact and soft capture complete.
Soft capture complete.
And contact confirmed. Dragon made contact with the International Space Station at 12:15 p.m. Pacific time, flying 277 statute miles over South Africa.
And there are still a few steps to complete before Dragon is securely attached to station. We'll complete the soft capture ring retraction, and just a few minutes later, the hard capture sequence will begin. And about 10 minutes after that contact moment,
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ring retraction in progress.
there's just a call out for that soft capture ring retraction, starting that sequence there. Again, about 10 minutes after first contact will be when Dragon hard docking is completed. That's when all 12 of the hooks on Dragon have connected with the International Space Station. And there are 12 hooks, but 6 will begin the process for capture at a time. Again, you can follow that. A little hard to see the graphic in your bottom right-hand screen there, but you can follow along with the hard capture docking sequence there on that graphic. And there, that's a little bit better view of that bottom right-hand corner hard capture graphic there.
And again, if you're just joining us, we did have a docking at 12:15 p.m. Pacific time while the International Space Station was flying over South Africa. Crew 12 did launch on February 13th at 2:15 a.m. Pacific time and is comprised of NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, as well as European Space Agency or ESA astronaut Sophie Adeneau and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev. And as you can see on your screen there, they are now docked to the Zenith port of the International Space Station. The soft capture system will now begin retracting to bring the spacecraft in closer for a hard capture, which is accomplished by deploying 12 hooks in 2 sets of 6.
And the crew is still seated in their seats all the way through hard capture. Once the vehicle is hard docked to the International Space Station, they can get out of those seats and actually doff their suits and get a little bit more comfortable inside the Dragon spacecraft as they wait for the hatch to open to the International Space Station.
So Dragon's soft capture system will now begin retracting to
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Bring retraction complete. Docking sequence holding for MCS. Reconfiguration.
And you did hear that confirmation that the soft capture retreat is complete. Next up will be hard capture, which is accomplished by deploying 12 hooks, 2 sets of 6 hooks to firmly hold Dragon in place. And that process does take about 15 minutes or so. Then once all docking events are successful, flight controllers will configure Dragon for docked operations and connect power and data to the spacecraft. At that point, the crew will be able to get out of their spacesuits and set them up to dry and begin operations to get the hatches open and join the expedition crew on board the space station. That does include pressurizing the vestibule, which NASA astronaut Chris Williams will be primed to do, as well as a round of leak checks. And that does take about 2 hours before the hatches will be open today. Following that, we'll have a welcome ceremony before the crew goes into a safety briefing and begins to get up to speed and adjust to life on the International Space Station following their liftoff from Florida yesterday at 2:15 a.m. Pacific. It's been an approximately 34-hour rendezvous for Crew 12 following their liftoff. They did dock today at 12:15 p.m. Pacific while flying south of South Africa.
Now, as we're waiting for hard capture to complete, you're looking at a view on the left-hand side that is Mission Control here in Hawthorne, as well as on your right-hand screen, Mission Control Houston at Johnson's Space Center. The teams are still working in tandem together while the crew is still on board Dragon, but once that hatch is open and the crew can make their way onto the International Space Station, Johnson will take it from there.
Station Houston on the big loop. MCS configured. We are proceeding with hook driving.
Station copies.
Great news. That means that the hard capture sequence is now beginning. This takes just a few minutes, about 4 minutes, to complete that hard capture. It'll be 6 hooks at a time for 12 hooks total to complete that hard docking.
And we don't currently have views of Dragon and the International Space Station at this moment due to a handover between satellites, which happens from time to time and is expected. But on the left hand of your screen there, you do see Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California, as well as on the right hand of your screen, Mission Control in Houston, Texas. We still are in integrated operations where we have the big loop configured. That big loop is between both Mission Control centers in Hawthorne and Houston, as well as the crew on the International Space Station and the crew inside of Freedom, who just docked to the International Space Station about 8 minutes ago at 12:15 p.m. Pacific. Hooks are continuing to drive and work through the procedures for that hard mate between Dragon, Freedom, and the International Space Station. With Freedom now docked to the International Space Station, there are 7 visiting spacecraft on board. That includes NASA's SpaceX 33rd Cargo Resupply Mission, JAXA, Japan Aerospace Agency's HTV X-1, Northrop Grumman's Cygnus 23 spacecraft, the Roscosmos Soyuz MS-28, as well as 2 Roscosmos cargo spacecraft, Progress 92 and Progress 93.
As Sandra mentioned, we don't have any live views at this moment, so we are just waiting for confirmation of the hard capture, that is the 12 hooks latching on to the International Space Station. We should just have a couple minutes left in that sequence. We'll wait for that call out for that confirmation.
And once Crew 12 gets on board the International Space Station, they will complete some training as part of emergency procedures and get acquainted with their new home for the next 8 months. The key point of their mission is to conduct a variety of science experiments to help advance research and technology for future Moon and Mars missions and to benefit humanity back on Earth. Some of this research includes a study on pneumonia-causing bacteria that could help improve treatments here on Earth, as well as on-demand IV fluid generation for future space missions. They're also going to be working on an automated plant health monitoring investigation, as well as investigations of plant and nitrogen-fixing microbe interactions, which could help enhance food production in space, as well as here on the ground. As we think about long-duration missions to the Moon and Mars, growing our own food is going to be critical, as it may not always be possible to send cargo space flights up. So this investigation could lead to improved plant growth on board the International Space Station and then eventually onto the Moon and Mars. The first set of hooks is now closed, and the second set is traveling.
SpaceX on the big loop, hard capture complete. And at this time, you are go to step into suit doffing.
At Gentle Contact, we have bridged the legacy of humankind's continuous presence in space, spanning more than 25 years at this very site. The International Space Station is more than a structure. It is a promise kept, decades in the making, built by nations, sustained by trust and partnership, and powered by science, innovation, and curiosity. As we look back at Earth from these windows, we are reminded that cooperation is not just possible, it is essential. Up here, there are no borders, and hope is universal.
I want to thank the teams at NASA, SpaceX, ESA, CSA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. Your work has guided us safely here across the vastness of space to this outpost where all of humanity lives and learns together. Crew 12 is honored to join our Expedition 74 friends and colleagues, Sergei Kucherchkov, Sergei Mikhaev, and Chris Williams, to add our chapter to the story of the International Space Station.
Maintenant, un mot pour les Français. Bonjour les Français depuis la capsule Dragon SpaceX avec l'équipage Crew 12. Un grand merci à toutes les équipes de SpaceX, de la NASA, de l'ESA, du CNES, de Roscosmos, de la CSA et JAXA qui contribuent directement au succès de cette mission. Nous venons nous amarrer à la Station Spatiale Internationale après 34 heures de vol libre. Tout se passe de manière nominale et la Terre est vraiment, vraiment belle depuis là-haut. Merci à vous de votre soutien et de votre enthousiasme. Ça nous fait chaud au cœur. Je suis fière d'embarquer la France et l'Europe dans cette incroyable aventure qui dépasse les frontières. Comptez sur moi pour en partager toutes les étapes avec vous et faire briller les étoiles dans les yeux des Français. Prenez soin de vous et à bientôt. Over to Andrew.
Отличная работа, ребята. Всем большое спасибо.
Grateful to be on board and we're ready to get to work.
And those were some words from our Crew 12 crew that arrived to the International Space Station at 12 p.m. Pacific this afternoon. We did get confirmation as well that all of the hooks...
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Good words there. We're going to continue monitoring the docking sequence, and I'll maintain awareness with you. You are go to doff suits per 4.012 and begin cabin configurations in 4.400 in parallel. For awareness, we will have big loop comms only until 2038. So again, we're big loop comms only. And at this time, I can report docking complete.
Dock is complete and big loop comms only.
Great news. Docking is officially complete. Now that Dragon has completed its docking sequence, the spacecraft must undergo a handful of checks before the hatch is opened. The crew on board Dragon will now get a chance to get out of their suits and get comfortable before moving into hatch operations.
That's right, and things will be picking up inside the space station too as NASA's Chris Williams gets the hatch on the station side ready to be opened and starts pressurizing that area known as the vestibule between the Dragon and station hatches. With Dragon docked, that's going to do it for us here in Hawthorne, but our coverage for Crew 12 won't stop here.
In a minute, we're going to toss it over to Leah in Mission Control Houston to take us through the vestibule depressurization and hatch opening, when we'll see NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adano, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev float into the International Space Station. But first, let's have a quick recap here. They got suited up and took a very short ride to the launch pad, ingressed on Dragon, and then yesterday, February 13th at 2:15 a.m. Pacific time, 5:15 a.m. Eastern, the 9 Merlin 1D engines ignited and Falcon 9 lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40, beginning Crew 12's journey to the International Space Station. Our Stage 1 vehicle came back down to Earth and landed at our newest recovery site, Landing Zone 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Base. Dragon then separated from Falcon 9's second stage, allowing Dragon to fly free with Crew 12 on board. We had a good nose cone deploy, as well as completed 5 major burns on Dragon, and then docking was confirmed today at 12:15 p.m. Pacific, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time today, February 14th, 2026.
And you can follow at SpaceX on X and NASA on social media for real-time updates. Thanks again for watching. Go NASA, go SpaceX, and go Crew 12. And for those of you watching on X, please head over to NASA Plus to follow the coverage live.
Thanks for being with us today, Sandra. It was great to have you. And thank you to everybody for tuning in.
Now over to Leah Cheshire at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston to continue sharing the mission as the crew prepares to board their home for the next several months, the International Space Station. And thank you once more. And for those celebrating Valentine's Day today, we truly hope your day is out of this world.
Happy Valentine's Day indeed here in Mission Control Houston. Again, it was an exciting moment for all of us here in Mission Control Houston following Dragon's docking at 2:15 p.m. Central Time while flying 277 statute miles south of South Africa. With Dragon safely docked to the International Space Station, we're going to be welcoming that new crew of 4 crew members aboard shortly to conduct important science and research aboard the orbiting laboratory. As we've been discussing, NASA astronaut Chris Williams is prime on the space station side for these upcoming and ongoing operations. He's securing some hardware and then moving right into those hatch preparation operations. First thing he will do is open the large hatch at the node 2 Zenith. That's where the Dragon spacecraft docked today and where they will remain until they get ready to go home several months from now. That Zenith port is the space-facing port on the International Space Station, and opening that hatch will give Williams access inside the pressurized mating adapter. The team will work to pressurize the vestibule. That's the small area between the Dragon and the space station hatch. It is now no longer exposed to the vacuum of space, but it needs to be filled with air and make its pressure nearly equal to what is aboard the station and Dragon. So Chris Williams is going to use a small valve on the station's hatch and slowly introduce air into that tiny space, the vestibule. The flight controllers here at Mission Control Houston are monitoring these operations as well as that pressure and the temperature readings inside. We're going to pause for a leak check once they have filled that space with air, and then get ready to open up the hatches. This is a process that takes a little bit of time. We expect it to take about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open those hatches, and we're targeting 4 p.m. Central Time for that. We will be live here the entire time and can't wait to see that crew float through the hatch. Once we open the hatch, the crew will configure Dragon for their on-orbit operations, and they will complete the space station safety briefing. This is the first order of business for a crew when they arrive on the space station, and they will be participating in that with the 3 crew members who have been living and working aboard the orbiting laboratory. Just before that safety briefing, though, we will get to hear from the crew themselves in their welcome ceremony. And shortly after the safety briefing, the USOS crew members will transfer some emergency equipment from Dragon to the space station. They'll also participate in a little bit of a crew handover period. We usually have another commercial crew aboard the International Space Station when we have a new crew dock. Crew 11 returned a little bit earlier than planned last month, so they have completed a lot of their handover here on the ground, and this will allow the crew that's living aboard the space station to get the new crew members up to speed with what's been happening. We'll get into the evening on the space station at that point, and that'll be the crew's pre-sleep and sleep period. Again, the International Space Station operates in GMT, and so it is currently 8:46 p.m. if you are living and working on the space station. Again, we're going to continue to provide live coverage of the remainder of the process through hatch opening and the welcoming ceremony from here in Mission Control Houston. This view on your screen, NASA astronaut Chris Williams. He is the only NASA astronaut currently aboard the International Space Station, but that is about to change as he will welcome his crewmates Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway. The other 2 crew members currently living on the International Space Station that arrived on Soyuz MS-28 with Williams are Sergei Kudzverchkov and Sergei Mikhaev. And again, our crew 12 crew joining us today, NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, ESA astronaut Sophie Adano, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyayev. The Crew 12 crew joining today are going to be part of Expedition 74 on the International Space Station. That began on December 8th, 2025. It'll continue through the departure of the Soyuz MS-28 crew later this year. And as we have discussed previously in this broadcast, we are celebrating 25 years of human presence aboard the International Space Station, meaning if you are under 25 years old, there has never been a day in your life that all humans have been on the Earth. We've always had somebody living in space. NASA astronaut Chris Williams there in the center of your screen has started the vestibule pressurization process. We are in a handover period aboard the International Space Station. We hand over our satellites from in the tracking and data relay satellite system. So these are all monitored and expected handover periods. We'll regain communications with the International Space Station very shortly.
Time was 28:40.
Houston copies 2040
and we have regained those video communications with the space station. Again, this view looking into the Node 2 Zenith or space-facing hatch and port. That is where Crew 12 docked in the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft at 2:15 p.m. Central Time. NASA astronaut Chris Williams did begin the vestibule pressurization process. Again, the vestibule is that small space between both the space station hatch and the Dragon hatch, and that area was previously exposed to the vacuum of space, so we have to introduce air from the space station side to make it equal to both of those atmospheres. Throughout this time frame, the teams at Mission Control Houston have they pause for leak checks in this vestibule. Sometimes those can fluctuate based on temperature, or it can appear to fluctuate based on temperature. So these help us ensure that the atmosphere is leveled out once we have begun pressurizing that area. Just a moment ago, we saw a glimpse of Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Kutsverchkov, one of the two cosmonauts and one of the two Sergeys living aboard the International Space Station, the other being Sergei Mikhaev. He is standing by also to welcome the new crew members aboard the space station.
on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX has you loud and clear on Dragon to ground. Just wanted to offer the PMC if required.
So, suggestion is to set up the PMC, but for now, procedure in work. No questions yet, but please prepare.
SpaceX copies. I'm going to go ahead and set up Dragon to ground private. Any comms that come from the cabin mic will be on Dragon to ground private, and so we'll just have that ready to go and be standing by for any questions.
Dragon copies.
That voice coming from inside Dragon is ESA, or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adeno. She is a French astronaut. This is her first flight to the International Space Station. She is calling down to the core, the crew operations and resource engineer in Hawthorne, California. That is at SpaceX there, and that's who the crew aboard Dragon communicates while they are in that spacecraft. We have a similar role here called Capcom, the capsule communicator, but that is the person communicating with the International Space Station crew members. You heard Adeno mention a PMC. That's a private medical conference. We typically schedule these for the crew throughout their mission, and the crew also has the opportunity to request one at any time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop for awareness. ISS power connection established.
Экипаж МКС, ЦУПу Москвы в Канаду.
Again, if you're just joining us, we are live here in Mission Control Houston at Johnson Space Center, where we have been monitoring the arrival and docking of the Crew 12 mission to the International Space Station. Dragon docked to the Node 2 Zenith, or space-facing port, at 2:15 p.m. Central Time today, February 14th. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is pressurizing the vestibule. He is the prime on the station side for these hatch opening operations. This pressurization process takes a little while, can take up to 2 hours before we see that hatch open from the Dragon side and see our new crew members fly through. Two views. On the left side of your screen, you have the Dragon spacecraft docked to the International Space Station, and you just saw the lighting change a little bit. We are preparing to cross over that Terminator line, the difference between day and night on the space station. Again, Dragon docking at 2:15 p.m. Central Time. And it's currently flying over the border between North and South Korea, 260 statute miles over Earth. The International Space Station travels 17,500 miles per hour. That's about 5 miles a second, and sees 16 sunrises and sunsets a day. And if you've been watching throughout the broadcast, you've probably noted a few of those. And on the right side of your screen, again, that is the interior of the Node 2 Zenith hatch. That's where Dragon is docked, just on the other side. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is pressurizing the vestibule, small space between both the Dragon and the space station hatch. We are conducting leak checks as standard procedure. This helps us ensure that the pressure is equal in that space and is not caused by any temperature fluctuations. Once we have confirmation that the vestibule is pressurized, we will get into those hatch opening operations and we'll see our new crew members enter the space station. Now, as we continue with this vestibule pressurization and hatch opening operations, a little bit about the crew who just arrived on Crew 12 aboard SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft. Commander Jessica Meir spent a total of 205 days in space on her first space flight back in 2019. She was also part of the first all-female spacewalks with NASA astronaut Christina Cook. She holds a biology degree from Brown University. Next to her is the pilot, Jack Hathaway. He's making his first flight to space, and he is a Connecticut native. He earned a bachelor's degrees in physics and history from the U.S. Naval Academy. He has more than 2,500 flight hours in 30 types of aircraft, and he's flown 39 combat missions during several military operations. Serving as a Michelin specialist aboard Dragon is Sophie Adno. She is representing the European Space Agency, also known as ESA. She's a French native and studied engineering and specialized in spacecraft and aircraft flight dynamics during undergraduate work in France and received her master's degree from MIT. This is also her first trip to space. Rounding out this crew is Roscosmos cosmonaut and mission specialist Andrei Fedyaev. As a major in the Russian Air Force, he has logged more than 500 hours in Russian aircraft, and it's his second flight to space. Back in 2023, he launched as a mission specialist as part of Crew 6, where he spent nearly 186 days aboard the International Space Station. Again, Crew 12 launching yesterday at 4:15 a.m. Central Time, making an approximately 34-hour rendezvous to the International Space Station and docking today, February 14th at 2:15 p.m. Central Time. We are in another satellite handover with the International Space Station and the Tracking and Data Relay Satellite System. We will expect to regain those video communications, let's see, in about 5 minutes. Again, this view in Mission Control Houston at Johnson Space Center as all flight controllers continue to monitor systems aboard the International Space Station. 45 minutes now since the Crew 12 crew docked to the International Space Station aboard SpaceX's Dragon spacecraft. We are in the vestibule pressurization portion of the timeline. After that vestibule is pressurized, NASA astronaut Chris Williams will open the hatch on the space station side. The crew on the Dragon side will open their hatch, and we will welcome 4 new members to the International Space Station crew. We are celebrating 25 years of continuous presence on the International Space Station. While they're aboard the space station, Crew 12 will participate in more than 200 research and technology demonstrations. These include studies of pneumonia-causing bacteria to improve treatments, on-demand intravenous fluid generation for future space missions, automated plant health monitoring, investigations of plant and nitrogen-fixing microbe interactions that enhances food production in space, and research on how physical characteristics may affect blood flow during flight. The science that Crew 12 will conduct helps to directly advance research and technology for future Moon and Mars missions, but it also benefits humanity back on Earth. In that 25 years of continuous human presence on the space station, over 4,000 research investigations have been conducted. That includes work from over 5,000 researchers in 110 countries. During that time, we've seen 1.5 million pounds of cargo delivered to the space station, and in some of that includes 20,100 packages of food delivered. Those cargo resupply missions also provide those research experiments that the crews work on, as well as fuel for the International Space Station reboosts. On the right side of your screen, NASA astronaut Chris Williams. This is his first space flight. He launched last year on the Soyuz MS-28 rocket. As you can see him in that Node 2 Zenith hatch, he is checking the CTBs, or the cargo transfer bags. These are how items are stored aboard the International Space Station, and if you look closely, you can see they're each numbered, and each bag stores a different variety of items. We do have flight controllers here on the ground that track the location of every single item aboard the International Space Station, so that when a crew needs something, they know exactly where to tell them to look. Again, if you're just joining us, we had Crew 12 dock aboard their SpaceX Dragon spacecraft to the zenith or space-facing port on the International Space Station at 2:15 p.m. Central Time today, following an approximately 34-hour rendezvous after their launch yesterday morning at 4:15 a.m. Central Time. We are in the process of pressurizing the vestibule, that space between the Dragon and space station hatch. That was previously exposed to vacuum, so we have to introduce air from the space station side to make sure that the pressure equals out with both of these spacecraft. This process can take up to 2 hours. NASA astronaut Chris Williams is working this on the space station side. And we're standing by as they continue this process. We're expecting hatch opening at approximately 4 p.m. Central Time. We are in another satellite handover from the tracking data and relay satellite systems, and we expect to regain that communication shortly. This is Mission Control Houston and all of the flight controllers monitoring the mission today. The International Space Station and Dragon are currently flying approximately 259 statute miles over the North Pacific Ocean, west off the coast of California. They are in an orbital daytime, and you can see the International Space Station with your naked eye if you just know when to look. So if you look up Spot the Station on nasa.gov, you can type in your location and receive updates whenever the International Space Station will be visible to you at dawn or dusk.
SpaceX Dragon for suit drawing.
Go ahead, pursuit drawing.
Just so you know, we started an hour clock timer about 5 minutes ago.
All right, SpaceX copies on the big loop. Suit dry start time, I see that at about 21:08 UTC.
Station Houston on Space to Ground 2. Chris on the big loop for the hatch open.
Station's with you on Spacecraft 2.
Hey Chris, whenever you're ready, we are ready now for you to execute procedure 2.102. That's Crew Dragon arrival, part 2, step 3, go. We expect equalization to take 4 minutes.
Copy. Executing part 2 and go, and copy 4 minutes.
That call from Capcom, or capsule communicator Brandon Lesage, here in Mission Control Houston at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, to NASA astronaut Chris Williams, living and working aboard the International Space Station. Williams is prime for the hatch operation procedures today, and Lesage calling up that the vestibule leak check is complete.
Dragon SpaceX on Dragon to ground. Can you confirm which suit you had the observation on the glove on?
Seat 4.
Copy.
And that call from the Corps in Hawthorne, the crew operations resource engineer, to the crew aboard Dragon, asking about a glove that the crew called down about earlier during suit leak checks.
Houston on the big loop. Wanted to pass you some big picture words on status. The vestibule leak check inside the station was good. The Node 2 Zenith hatch is open, and Chris is currently working on the rest of the procedure to open the APAS hatch.
Copy. Chris is working on the APAS hatch. SpaceX Dragon on the big loop.
SpaceX on the big loop.
I'm looking at 4.400 as we're also finishing 4.012. I'm wondering if we can defer some of the actions due to time and the CAO event. What recommendation you have? Like, for example, the consolidation of all the water and food trash into large outer bags. Would you recommend skipping any of those steps for now?
SpaceX copies. At this time, we do recommend trying to complete all actions in 4.400, which we may be able to accomplish before we're able to step into hatch opening. So I would like to prioritize trying to accomplish sections 2 and 3, if possible.
Okay, we'll do that.
A lot of communications going to and from the International Space Station as well as to and from Dragon. The crew inside Dragon are working through procedures to stow everything and begin that egress or exit from their capsule and ingress or enter the International Space Station, which will be their new home for the next several months. We did hear that we have a good vestibule pressure leak check. So we continue to step through these procedures smoothly before we open up the hatches. We are in a satellite handover with the Tracking Data Relay Satellite Systems. This is Mission Control Houston at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, where all the team members continue to monitor the arrival of Dragon and now these hatch opening operations. And if you're just joining us, it's been a little over an hour now since Crew 12 docked to the International Space Station. Again, that docking.
SpaceX is up on the big loop.
I'm just wondering, for that trash consolidation, is there another set of utensils in the downhill stuff? Are those utensils considered trash?
All right, SpaceX copies. There should be another set, but stand by one while I just confirm for you before I give you an affirmative.
Okay, we copy.
Now a view from both sides of the spacecraft that we are monitoring today. On the left, you have Dragon docked to the zenith or space-facing port of Node 2 on the International Space Station. On the right, you can see into that Node 2 hatch. Chris Williams, NASA astronaut on his first mission, has been pressurizing the vestibule, that space between the Dragon and space station hatch. We recently received word that they had a good leak check and that pressure is equal to the International Space Station. The crew aboard Dragon is working through some of their procedures, like configuring the cabin and collecting trash before they begin their journey into the International Space Station. That's timelined to happen at about 4 p.m. Central Time.
SpaceX Dragon, ready for the inventory.
SpaceX is ready to copy inventory, and I am still looking to confirm for the original question, which I will follow up on for utensils. But at this time, ready for inventory.
So for the inventory, water, bag number 2010, bag number 202, 0, bag number 203, 0, and bag number 204, 1.
Copy for 201 through 203, all 0, and 204 is 1.
That's correct. And for food, bag number 301, 302, 301, 302, 0.
All right, SpaceX copies. 301, 302 are both 0 for food.
Affirm, and for food again, 304, 303, 1.
Copy 1 for 304 and 303.
That's good words. And for waste, 17 uses of urine collection.
SpaceX copies 17 for the waste system. For the water, does this include, we will be using 1 water bottle in section 3 of 4.400. So want to confirm if your previous inventory accounts for that, or if you will use that bottle that's remaining in 204 for the waste system flush.
That's a very good point. We will use the remaining of 204, and so all of the 4 bags, 201 through 204, will be remaining 0 after the procedure.
All right, core copies. We'll have 0 remaining for bags 201 through 204. And I can confirm that we do have additional utensils for the downhill in bags 306 and 308. So again, for utensils, we have utensils for the downhill, so you should be able to dispose of utensils from the uphill.
Copy.
Those voices were ESA astronaut Sophie Adeno and the SpaceX core in Hawthorne, California. Adeno was reporting all of the inventory that they used aboard Dragon during their 34-orbit rendezvous to the International Space Station. As previously mentioned, everything aboard the space station is meticulously tracked, and the same is true for Dragon. This view in the center of your screen is NASA astronaut Chris Williams working through the hatch opening process. First up on the list was vestibule pressurization, introducing air from the space station side into that small space between both the SpaceX Dragon and International Space Station hatch. That has been confirmed complete after good leak checks. Again, we had docking today at 2:15 p.m. Central, and we are expecting hatch opening at about 4 p.m. Central.
Dragon, this is Houston on the Big Loop. Wanted to let you know to stand by for hardline audio config. What this means is there will be about 2 to 3 minutes of audio outage while we make the configuration swap. Do you have any questions?
Second copies are standing by.
As you heard that call to the crew from Houston Mission Control to the crew aboard Dragon, we have been using the C2V2 Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles link. It's an audio loop, also we call it the Big Loop, that allows us to talk to all of the crew members in space aboard the orbiting International Space Station, as well as aboard the SpaceX Dragon, with Mission Control Houston and Mission Control in Hawthorne, all on the same loop. Once Dragon arrives to the space station, we reconfigure that loop so that we all have individual again.
Copy that, Chris. At the moment, we want to recommend just hanging tight for a little bit longer. Otherwise, it might take some force by using your feet on the side and that sort of thing. But recommend stand by another few minutes.
Copy all. I'll stand by another few minutes, and then I can really give it some force.
Copy. And naturally, our inclination is to want to check to make sure that the APAS or the valve there is still open too.
Affirm, valve is open and the rollers are retracted.
We copy. Thank you.
Communications between Jacob Lesarge, the Capcom here, Mission Control Houston, and NASA astronaut Chris Williams, you see on your screen, on the International Space Station. With the vestibule pressurized, we are letting that level out before he attempts to open the APAS hatch. That helps make it a little bit easier to open that hatch. Requires a little less effort once that has leveled out with the pressure aboard the space station.
Dragon, Houston on the Big Loop. Com check. Hardline audio reconfig is complete.
Got you loud and clear on hardline.
We have you same. Sounds good.
NASA astronaut Chris Williams has opened the APAS hatch. That exposes the vestibule that he was previously pressurizing, and through that vestibule is the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft with the awaiting 4 Crew 12 crew members.
Is with you on the big loop.
Again, they're docking coming at 2:15 p.m. Central today.
We've got all of it out and just temp stowed right now. Is this coming in cessation with us now? We're just leaving it temp stowed? Is that the plan?
Negative. I believe we will have something scheduled on the crew timeline for a waste transfer later, not immediately at hatch open.
Okay, so that trash that we have in large outer bags should just kind of be temp stowed on Velcro hanging out in the capsule for now?
Affirm for now. We're not gonna transfer any waste yet.
Okay, we copy, and just an FYI, we'll have to give you a slight update for